I still remember the day they handed me that bottle. A $12 Cabernet with a tacky label from some bulk producer in Lodi. Here's something to remember the place by, Dad. My twins, Michael and Rebecca, both 40 years old and wearing matching expressions of what I can only describe as practiced indifference. Behind them stood the Victorian farmhouse that had been our family home for 3 generations, with rows of Syrah and Cabernet Franc stretching across 30 acres of prime Sonoma Valley land. Land that, until that morning, had been the Harrington family vineyard. Land worth north of $2 million that they'd just sold to Meridian Wine Group without so much as consulting me. "It's for the best," Rebecca said, not meeting my eyes. "You're getting older, and the place was becoming too much." Too much? I'd built this vineyard from nothing after my father nearly destroyed it with his drinking. I'd won awards, established our name in the industry, and created something that was supposed to last beyond me. And now I was left with nothing but a cheap bottle that I wouldn't even use for cooking. What my twins didn't know was that I had discovered their secret, the real reason they were so desperate to sell. And by the time our annual Harvest Festival came around the following weekend, everyone in 3 counties would know it too. The Harrington legacy in Sonoma began with my grandfather Elliot, who planted the first vines in 1938 after fleeing the Dust Bowl with nothing but a suitcase and farming knowledge. My father, Thomas, inherited it in the 60s when American wine was still considered inferior to European varieties. He had the right timing. Just before the famous 1976 Judgment of Paris put California wines on the map, but the wrong temperament. His drinking turned our family dinners into minefields of criticism and occasional violence. When he wasn't absent at the local tavern, he was present in the worst possible way. I still remember my high school graduation dinner. Dad showed up late, already 3 sheets to the wind. As I accepted a small scholarship from the California Vintners Association, he stood up and announced to everyone at Sonoma's Harvest Table restaurant, "The boy doesn't have what it takes. Harrington Wines will die with me." The restaurant fell silent. I can still feel the heat in my face, the tears I refused to shed. When I took over at 25 after his liver finally gave out, the vineyard was mortgaged to the hilt, the vines neglected. The first 5 years, I worked 18-hour days, sleeping on a cot in the fermentation room, taking classes at UC Davis viticulture program when I could. I married Elena, a microbiologist who helped revolutionize our fermentation process. Together, we restored Harrington to respectability, and by the time the twins were born in 1985, we were finally turning a profit. Michael and Rebecca grew up among the vines. They stomped grapes as children, learned to drive the tractor at 12, helped during harvest as teenagers. But neither showed the passion I'd hoped for. Michael went to Stanford and became an investment banker in San Francisco. Rebecca chose Boston University and opened a successful art gallery in Cambridge. They visited twice a year, Christmas and the annual Harvest Festival, our biggest public event. When Elena died from breast cancer 10 years ago, I thought they might come home, at least temporarily. Instead, they sent flowers and called more frequently for a month or 2. Then it was back to the holiday schedule. I made a decision then that I never told them about. I was 57, alone, with a thriving business that needed succession planning. I established a trust that would transfer ownership to the twins jointly when I turned 70, with a stipulation. The vineyard must remain in family hands for at least 10 years after the transfer, or they would forfeit 90% of its value to a viticulture scholarship fund. What I didn't know then was that they'd been hatching plans of their own. 3 months ago, Rebecca called with unusual news. Both she and Michael wanted to attend this year's spring pruning weekend, an industry event, not our public harvest festival. They'd never shown interest before. They arrived with significant others I'd never met, Michael's fiancée Alyssa, a corporate attorney, and Rebecca's partner Jordan, who ran a tech startup. That weekend, they asked endless questions about operations, finances, distribution. I was thrilled, thinking they'd finally developed an interest in their heritage. They took extensive photos, made notes, had hushed conversations on the veranda. Before leaving, Michael hugged me tightly and said, "Dad, we're going to make you proud." What they didn't realize was that later that night, I found Rebecca's iPad she'd left behind. A notification popped up, an email from Meridian Wine Group with the subject line, "Harrington Acquisition, Initial Offer." I shouldn't have opened it, but I did. The email revealed they'd been shopping the vineyard to corporate buyers for months, had already given Meridian a virtual tour, and shared confidential financial information. The email mentioned accommodating the father situation and accelerating the timeline before he gets wind of it. I said nothing when Rebecca called frantically about her forgotten iPad. I mailed it back unopened, and I began to plan. I didn't confront them immediately. Something in me, pride perhaps, or a lifetime of swallowing hurt, kept me silent. Instead, I consulted with Marian Delgado, my attorney of 30 years. She confirmed my worst fears. They'd found a loophole. While my trust stipulated what happened after the transfer at age 70, it didn't prevent them from exercising certain rights as legal heirs before then. "The twins filed for conservatorship last week, Jack," Marian told me, her voice heavy. "They're claiming you're showing signs of cognitive decline and are unfit to manage the estate." Their evidence? Selective examples of business decisions they deemed erratic, like my refusal to switch to mechanical harvesting or my insistence on maintaining our small batch approach when Meridian wanted to quadruple production. Plus, medical records they'd somehow obtained showing I'd been prescribed medication for mild anxiety after Elena's death. The court date was still 2 months away, but they'd moved faster than expected on the sale by having Michael's fiancée Alyssa, who specialized in elder law, fast-track the process. The court had granted them temporary financial oversight, enough to initiate the sale agreement. They must have assumed I would fight it directly, creating a messy legal battle that would drain my resources and energy. Instead, I appeared to accept defeat. When they called to inform me of the sale, "For your own good, Dad," I expressed disappointment but didn't argue. They seemed relieved, suspicious but relieved. "The Harvest Festival will be our last hurrah," I told them with practiced resignation, a proper goodbye to the community. The annual Harrington Harvest Festival had become a local institution over the 30 years I'd been running it. 300 guests, local businesses, loyal customers, wine critics, neighbors and friends gathered for a day of wine tasting, local cuisine, and live music among the vines. This year would be our 40th anniversary celebration. I threw myself into the preparations with unusual vigor. I hired the best caterer in Sonoma, booked a renowned string quartet, and sent handwritten invitations to every wine critic and influencer in Northern California. I made sure that Meridian executives would attend to ensure a smooth transition, I explained to the twins. The week before the festival, both Michael and Rebecca flew in with their partners. I welcomed them warmly, playing the part of the sad but accepting father. Michael seemed tense, constantly checking his phone. Rebecca kept finding reasons to touch my arm or shoulder, her eyes searching mine for signs of the anger she expected. "Dad's taking this well," I overheard Rebecca tell her partner Jordan on the porch. "Too well. It makes me nervous." "He's probably relieved," Jordan replied. "This place is a money pit compared to what Meridian is paying. He gets to retire in comfort." What they didn't know was that I'd been making calls of my own. To Gregory Parker, editor of Wine Spectator. To Maria Santos at the San Francisco Chronicle. To former Governor Brown, a wine enthusiast who'd visited us several times. To the president of the California Vintners Association. All would be attending the festival.
The night before the event, we had dinner together in the formal dining room. Alyssa, Michael's fiancée, raised her glass in an awkward toast. "To new beginnings," she said, "and to Jack for creating something beautiful that will live on in a new form." "To Dad," Michael added quickly, "we couldn't have done this without you." I smiled and raised my glass. "To family," I said simply. The twins exchanged glances. Rebecca cleared her throat. "Dad, we've been thinking. After the sale closes, we want to set you up in a beautiful place in Healdsburg, walking distance to restaurants, no maintenance." "I'm staying in the cottage," I interrupted mildly.
The cottage was a small caretaker's house at the edge of the property where my grandfather had lived in his final years. It's not part of the sale agreement. "But Dad, it's so isolated," Rebecca protested, "and you'd be watching strangers run what used to be yours." I looked at her steadily. "I know exactly who'll be running my vineyard, Rebecca. Don't worry about me." That night, I heard them talking in hushed, urgent tones on the porch. I caught fragments. "Acting strange. What if he knows? Too late to back out now." They had no idea how right they were. The day of the Harvest Festival dawned clear and warm, perfect wine country weather. By noon, the grounds were transformed with white canopies, long tables adorned with grapevines and lavender, and stages for the music and speeches. Guests began arriving at 2, greeted by the twins, who played perfect hosts, explaining the exciting transition to anyone who asked. Roger Meridian himself arrived with his executive team, all expensive suits and confident handshakes. I watched him survey the property with the calculating eyes of someone already planning changes. When he approached me, his condolences had the practiced sincerity of a politician. "Jack, we'll honor the Harrington legacy," he assured me, hand on my shoulder. "We're keeping the name, and we'll invite you to consult on the transition." I nodded appreciatively. "That's kind of you, Roger. I look forward to hearing more during the announcements." By 4 o'clock, all 300 guests were mingling among the vines, sampling our current vintages and the food pairings I'd meticulously planned. I spotted Gregory Parker from Wine Spectator deep in conversation with Maria Santos from the Chronicle. The former governor waved to me from across the lawn. At 4:30, Michael clinked his glass for attention and welcomed everyone. Rebecca stood beside him, beaming as he explained the exciting new chapter for Harrington Vineyards. He introduced Roger Meridian, who spoke about honoring traditions while embracing innovation and bringing Harrington wines to a global audience. When it was my turn to speak, I approached the microphone slowly. I could see relief in my children's eyes. Almost done, almost official. "For 40 years," I began, "I've hosted this festival to celebrate not just wine, but community. Harrington isn't just a label or a plot of land. It's the embodiment of a philosophy that values craftsmanship over mass production, relationships over transactions, and legacy over quick profits." I paused, looking directly at my children. "Which is why I must share some difficult news. My twins, Michael and Rebecca, have indeed arranged to sell this vineyard, against my wishes and through a questionable legal strategy involving a temporary conservatorship." A murmur ran through the crowd. The twins froze, color draining from their faces. "What they don't know," I continued, "is that 6 months ago, I legally transferred 60% ownership of Harrington Vineyards to the children of Elena's sister, my niece Sophia and nephew Marco, who have been apprenticing with renowned vineyards in Napa and Tuscany, respectively, for the past 5 years. Gasps and whispers rippled across the gathering. I gestured to the side, where Sophia and Marco stepped forward, both in their early 30s, both bearing the unmistakable facial features of their Aunt Elena.
"The sale my children arranged is invalid," I said clearly. "And while I regret having to address this publicly, I felt you all deserve to know that Harrington wines will continue with the next generation, just not the one Michael and Rebecca expected." I turned to face the stunned Meridian executives. "Mr.
Meridian, I believe your legal team will find the documents my attorney is providing quite illuminating. The deposit you paid is being returned as we speak." Finally, I faced my children directly. "Michael, Rebecca, we'll discuss this privately. For now, I think it's best if you leave." The silence was absolute. Then Rebecca's partner Jordan tugged her arm, and they began moving toward the exit. Michael stood frozen until Alyssa whispered urgently in his ear. As they walked away, heads bowed, the crowd parted silently. I watched them go, feeling a complex mix of vindication and sorrow. Then I turned back to the microphone. "Now, I believe we still have a harvest to celebrate. The 2025 vintage is promising to be exceptional." The aftermath was both immediate and extended. As the last guests departed, whispers followed them down the driveway. By morning, the story had reached the San Francisco Chronicle, with Maria Santos's headline reading, "Family Vineyard Drama, Sonoma Winemaker Outfoxes Corporate Takeover Attempt Led by His Own Children." Marion called to report that Meridian's lawyers were backing away swiftly, wanting no part of the family dispute. They're citing undisclosed material information and canceling all agreements, she said. Roger Meridian personally called to apologize. He claims they had no idea you weren't on board. 3 days passed before I heard from either of my children. Rebecca called first, her voice tight with anger and embarrassment. "You humiliated us in front of everyone," she said without preamble. "You could have told us privately about Sophia and Marco." "The way you told me privately about selling my life's work?" I countered. "We were trying to help you," she insisted. "You're getting older, the industry is changing, and you're too stubborn to adapt. We thought—" "You thought about the money," I interrupted. "Be honest, at least now." The silence stretched between us. Finally she spoke, her voice smaller. "It wasn't just about the money, Dad. Every time we visit, all we hear about is how we disappointed you by not coming home to run the vineyard, how the Harrington legacy is dying with you." This pulled me up short. Had I really been so transparent in my disappointment? Michael called the next day, more measured but still defensive. "Do you have any idea what this has done to my reputation? I had colleagues at that event, clients." "I'm sorry it came to this," I told him honestly, "but you were taking something that wasn't yours to take." "We're your children," he said. "What's yours is supposed to become ours. That's how it works. Inheritance isn't an entitlement, Michael. It's a responsibility." A week later, an unexpected visitor arrived at my door. It was Jordan, Rebecca's partner, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Rebecca doesn't know I'm here," they admitted, "but there's something you should know. The vineyard sale, it wasn't just about money or thinking you couldn't handle it anymore." Jordan explained that Rebecca had been diagnosed with a rare autoimmune condition last year. The treatments were experimental and expensive, not fully covered by insurance. Michael had proposed the vineyard sale as a solution, convincing Rebecca it was also the right thing for me. "She was too proud to ask for help," Jordan said. "She didn't want you worrying about her on top of everything else." This revelation hit me like a physical blow. Why hadn't she come to me? What kind of distance had grown between us that my own child couldn't tell me she was ill? 2 days later, I flew to Boston unannounced. When Rebecca opened her door, her surprise quickly shifted to wariness. But something in my expression must have communicated that I knew, because her composure cracked,
And suddenly we were embracing for the first time in years, really embracing. Over dinner, she explained her condition, treatable but requiring ongoing care. I listened, asked questions, and finally said, "The vineyard was always meant to provide for this family. Let me help you." Meanwhile, Sophia and Marco had arrived in Sonoma to begin the transition we'd planned months earlier. Their enthusiasm for winemaking reminded me of my own at their age. Sophia had innovative ideas about sustainable practices, while Marco brought techniques he'd learned in Italy. Together, we began imagining a revitalized Harrington Vineyards. Michael was the hardest to reconcile with. His pride had taken the greatest hit, and his fiancée, Alyssa, urged him to maintain distance. But when Sophia invited him to consult on a new business plan, his financial expertise proved valuable. Slowly, cautiously, we began rebuilding trust. By the following spring, we had established a new structure. The vineyard would remain under family ownership, with Sophia and Marco running daily operations. I would step into an advisory role. Michael would manage our financial strategy remotely, and Rebecca, whose health was improving with treatment, would handle marketing and our online presence from Boston. As for that bottle of cheap wine the twins had handed me, I kept it displayed prominently in the tasting room, a reminder of how close we'd come to losing everything, not just the vineyard, but our connection to each other. One evening, as we sat on the veranda watching the sunset over the vines, Sophia asked about the inscription on the cornerstone of the old winery building. "Family above all." "Your grandfather put that there," I told her. "I always thought it meant family comes first."
Now I realize it might also mean that family is something we build over time, something larger than any one of us. Marco raised his glass. "To family above all," he said. We all drank to that. 67 years of life have taught me that legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what grows from the seeds you've planted. Our vineyard didn't just survive. It's thriving with new energy and perspective. Last month, Harrington Reserve Syrah won Best in Show at the California State Fair, the first time since Elena was alive. The twins visit more often now, not out of obligation, but genuine interest. Rebecca's health has stabilized, and she's brought her artistic eye to our rebranded labels. Michael just helped secure distribution in 3 new states. We're not perfect. Family never is, but we're rooted in something real again. As for that bottle of cheap wine, I finally opened it on my birthday. We all took a sip and laughed at how terrible it was. Then we opened something worth drinking, our first vintage created under Sophia and Marco's guidance. Some things are worth preserving, even when it means embracing change. If you've ever faced betrayal by those closest to you, or struggled with letting go while holding on to what matters, I hope my story reminds you that it's never too late to rewrite the ending. Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes, if you're brave enough to stand your ground. If you found value in my story, please subscribe to the channel for more real-life family dramas and resolutions. Share this video with someone navigating their own family complexities. Until next time, remember that the most important vintages are still to come.